Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Statesman Soundwave with your host, Raghav Khosla. Today, I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Nick Corso, to talk about a story that popped up at Stevenson in the recent weeks. A former Air Force veteran returned a library book that was 40 years due, but we found out that that book was a big influence on him joining the Air Force. So that got us thinking, how important is high school in determining future plans for individuals? I mean, there's so many experiences and things that happen in high school that may shape our futures. So we thought, why not go into that topic even further? So we talked to Mr. Meredith, who's the Air Force veteran. We spoke with Miss O'Neill, who's a physics teacher at Stevenson and attended Stevenson in the past. And we thought we would open this podcast up in a new way by sharing our own perspectives on this topic. So Nick, I'll start by asking you, what are some of your interests?
Well, for me, some of my interests are usually just broadcasting in general. I really like sports broadcasting, in particular, broadcasting football games, basketball games, and I do that here at Stevenson as well. And I think it's a really broad range of how you can include sports and talk shows in one. And I think it's a great way to collaborate people with sports interests, podcast interests, and combine it into one.
Definitely, and I have similar interests. I'm really into sports. I would say I spend a lot of my time reading sports journalism, watching NBA games specifically, but also other sports. And overall, I would say sports is probably my biggest interest. The fast-paced nature and everything about sports is what excites me. And I would say that's connected to my future plans. Now, I plan on pursuing journalism, but ultimately the goal will be to pursue sports journalism because I'm always expressing my opinion about sports, whether it be with my friends at the lunch table, on random Twitter threads. I really just like talking about sports, so why not do that for a living? So what about you? Do you have any potential future plans that are related to broadcasting?
Yeah, I totally agree with you about sports journalism. I think that's one of my major goals in life is to study sports journalism. But broadcasting is also something that I'm looking to study and really get better at as well. Along with your point about reading sports journalism, I think that's a really big focal point of my life. I think it circulates with everything that I do, including social media, writing in school, and just everything with like family and friends such as that. And I think with future plans, I plan on really just broadcasting and doing sports journalism. I'm trying to focus on both, but I also have an interest with business such as economics. I think economics is really important for this world, and I think it really connects both with sports journalism and economics, and I think I'll be able to really talk about both of those really well.
Definitely, and finances are so important in sports. We see in every, at least American sports league, salary caps play such a big role in constructing rosters, and having a acute understanding of both of those would be really impactful towards the journalism or whatever you end up broadcasting. So have there been certain experiences at Stevenson? You mentioned that you're in broadcasting club, so is that an experience and other experiences that have contributed to your plans for the future?
Yeah, that's one of them. And I think it's a really broad question because Stevenson has a lot to offer depending on what you like and what you want to pursue. But Sports Broadcasting Club is the focal point. Sports broadcasting is led by some great advisors, and it's really student-led, which is really important for many students. And you can go really far with it, such as different sports, such as football and basketball. But you can also broadcast field hockey, which I haven't noticed in the past, but reading upon what field hockey is like and actually broadcasting a field hockey game is so much different than I would thought. And it just goes to show how broad Stevenson is with clubs and activities. And something else would be Sports Analytics Club. Along with Broadcasting Club, Sports Analytics Club is just like the main sports, just professional-wise, just reading upon stats and everything like that, and learning about just different ways of how sports is diagnosed by different people. Yeah,
Definitely, and we talked about like field hockey. Stevenson has such like niche sports that other schools might not have. Like we have a fencing team, we have an ice hockey team that's doing really well in state right now. So we have so many of these opportunities in high school that help us shape our future plans. You mentioned sports broadcasting club. I personally am not a part of that, but when quarantine started, I've always, as I said, had a passion for podcasting. So I talked to Mr. Bradshaw, who's our Statesman advisor, and he let me on staff, and now I'm podcasting for Statesman. So I've had these influential experiences working with great peers such as Nick here, where we've been working on this podcast for a while now, and it's good to learn these people skills in high school because it tells you how you work in a team, and that will have a important impact on you as you progress in your life. So it's really interesting. At least you've heard our perspective now on how high school is really affecting our personal lives. But let's talk to Mr. Meredith now and see what he believes, how that book, first of all, that amazing story about how he returned a library book 40 years late, but how other experiences in high school really led him down the path of being a member of the Air Force and eventually becoming a veteran. So can we start by just tell us about yourself, your career, your schooling at Stevenson? Just tell us about yourself.
Well, let's start with Stevenson because most of the stuff before that probably nobody cares about. But at Stevenson, I came in, I did 7th and 8th grade at Twin Groves, and then came in with a kind of our grouping, and then you had other schools feeding into it. So it was a pretty diverse group of students that came together on that in our class. And I think we had somewhere around 350, 360 some of the students, which is probably laughable now because you guys have, you're pushing what? Yeah, you guys are, $4,000. I mean, I came back in 98 and you guys were, I think at that time we're like 4,800 or had been 4,800 in the years before that or around that. And it was just, it's phenomenal to see the amount of growth that's happened with Stevenson and the seeds of success of that school comes from the community because there's a lot of that, but then also you had such a diverse group of people feeding into the schools. It was very interesting. Like, my best friend ended up coming from Hawthorne Woods, and through him I met a guy that I'm still friends with that lives. He was part of Wakanda, but now he lives in Lake Zurich. And there's a lot of I don't know, different cliques and different groups that you could belong to, or kind of float between those things and that. And each one kind of gave you a little something of themselves to make you feel like you were part of the group. So, it wasn't, I don't want to say it was a John Hughes movie or any of that stuff, Brat Pack, not Brat, the Brat Pack and that kind of stuff, but it was filmed just down the road. So, some of that resonated with us as students, kind of like when you watch Spinal Tap and try and relate that to what modern rock bands are. And, rock bands are like, yeah, some of that stuff they were goofing on, but it actually does happen, getting lost in the backstage stuff. So I think there was just being ranked one of the top schools in the state was what it was when we were going through. I don't think that we really appreciated how good it was till we got out of Stevenson and moved on to college and moved on to wherever life took us. So, that was, I don't know, it was a great melting pot for different students to get introduced to each other and then kind of, I don't know, help each other out. Then you guys were asking what was life after that. That was kind of the Stevenson stuff. I went to University of Illinois, like probably 50 or 60% of the class, it seemed, had gone down there. Went into the architecture program thanks to Professor Johansson, who was teaching the architecture and engineering graphics classes there. He did a phenomenal job and kind of, I already had a desire to kind of work on architecture and engineering. He kind of fed that very nicely from the faculty side, and I ended up at Illinois. I did a year there, and then I was looking at going into the Army National Guard through Illinois, and their help pay for college and things along those lines. And then just before I was getting ready to go to basic training and that, I said, you know what, I think I'm gonna go into the Air Force. My dad had been in the Air Force, so I think I got nipped in the butt, or it kind of bit me early seeing pictures of my dad sitting with all these filing cabinets and kind of sit back in his chair, and he had a sidearm on him, and I'm like, Dad, what were you doing in the Air Force? And he couldn't talk about it then. And I'm like, okay. And then reading books like the book that I turned in, 40 years late. I'm sorry. But it was, I don't know. I think I got bit by the history, and then the family ties to it. And I don't know. It just felt like a natural fit at that time. And I ended up going in, served through the Storm Desert Shield area, or time frame, I should say, out of Dover Air Force Base, where I was working on C-5 aircraft, which were the largest cargo planes in the free world, and working on the radio and radar systems and the black boxes and all the other stuff that you hear about. The planes go down, unfortunately, but it was, it was a great opportunity to, to serve my country and, I don't know, better myself and kind of take advantage of the opportunities that were there. So,
Cool.
yeah, I think that gets me into the military stuff. So
Yeah.
we just want to bring up the book now.
Yeah. So
sure.
and the main portion is obviously the interest with the book, being that you returned it 40 years later. So the first main question that we have is like, why did the book interest you at first, and why did you check it out?
I think I had checked out a bunch of books for a freshman first semester assignment. I think we had to write on something from history. So I went and got all these World War II books because I was really interested in, like I said, my dad had got me, kind of set the Air Force bug in my mind. And, we didn't have all of the Google and YouTube rabbit holes to fall down to find out about these things. You actually had to pick up a book and actually read it and turn a page and other things. So I think I checked out several books, and I've honestly, probably over the last 25 years, I've tried to figure out, how did this not get returned? Because when you graduate, you go to college, you put a bunch of stuff in storage with your parents, and then I'm moving around with the Air Force, and and I finally get all my stuff back, and I'm sorting through stuff, and I'm like, I'm down in Champaign going to school for electrical engineering, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this book. And I'd taken very good care of it, and I'm like, okay, well, I picked it up and read it again, and I just I don't know. I think it just fed that interest in history and Air Force, from a different perspective. But yeah, it was just I don't know. I think it was an entertaining and engaging book at a time when I needed reference material, and maybe subconsciously I just set it aside and didn't return it, or I honestly don't remember. And I fall upon the mercy of the librarians to forgive my overdue fees and everything else. So
Yeah,
they've been kind.
Yeah, sometimes things just stick. I remember I still have this. I'm really into basketball, and I still have this like really small basketball that I used to play with when I was like, I think my parents had on. I was to have a photo with it, and I still have it in my room because it's just it's important to me. So I guess we all have these things that just stick with us and keep us going.
And you'll find that on the oddest things that you'll hang on to, and just kind of it's not so much an object, it's much more of a connection to a memory at a time and a place that was more important. And this is the one thing you can take with. Everybody can take a picture and do a TikTok or something like that, but to actually have something in your hand that sits on the shelf and you just glance at it, and it immediately takes you back there. As you guys grow older and you move through your careers and lives and families in the future, and that you'll probably find more and more of those things on your shelf, and to the point where you have to build a second shelf. So don't get rid of that basketball. You'll appreciate it. I guarantee you.
Definitely.
Okay, so as you said before, you entered the Air Force. So we were just wondering, like, what influence did like the actual book? Did it have any information that led you to the Air Force, or anything like that?
I'd say it probably filled in some memory, or I shouldn't say memory, filled in some gaps on history of stuff that I thought I knew from seeing, like, there was some stuff on TV once in a while on a Saturday afternoon or something, WGN or one of the channels would play something. But I think it was more of a like a reference for understanding how a lot of that stuff happened, because the U.S. got into the war a little later than than it actually started, and Britain was kind of defending itself, and it was just kind of interesting to hear something that was from outside our culture, or kind of was telling a story that maybe we weren't involved at and weren't covering real heavily over here, but it was affecting, our allies. Imagine somebody was dropping bombs on Lincolnshire and all that. What would the drama be, and how would it get documented in a time before multimedia? So it was just kind of nice to understand what strategy and what kind of things were going on, and just kind of, I don't know, appreciate what was going on someplace away from us. As far as, did I read that and then it said in the back of the book, like, join the Air Force now? No, it never said that. I think it was just part of the narrative of, seeing the pictures when I was a little kid, wondering what my dad's doing with all those things, which until this summer, I did not know what he did. I did not know what was in the filing cabinets. But, I'm watching these things and it's just like, what, I'm already looking to go into the Army. Why do I want to go halftime when I think I wanted to do something more immersive and go full-time Air Force in that? So, I did my weekend drills with folks down in Urbana and then up in Waukegan when I transferred back here before going into the Air Force basic training, and ended up doing a bunch of work with the Army while I was in, supporting their missions. And then also when I got out, I was working on some autonomous vehicle work through John Deere and with the military. So all respect to all the members of the military branches. So even though it wasn't a right fit for me at that time, I know a lot of people that have really, strapped that on and have done wonderful things with their life in that. So.
Definitely. And if we can ask, what was in the filing cabinets? Are we allowed to know? Is that just for you?
I think we can know because, well, here's the thing is, I had a top secret clearance because I was working on all this, communication stuff, and and I'm like, well, Dad, you can tell me. I got the codes for tomorrow if I needed it. And it's like, no. And then finally we asked him, and kept pestering him, and he said those were all filled with like files and that kind of stuff, because him and a guy that he went into the service with, who I don't have his name right in front of me, they went in together on the same day and they got matched together on a team where their job was to figure out, strategic routes for moving logistics and stuff like that. So, if you had to get an airplane or something somewhere, and you had to know where all the anti-aircraft stuff was, or where the missiles would be coming through. And this is the middle of the Cold War, so we're talking early 60s. You had Kennedy coming in. You had a lot of really complicated things going on, and they didn't necessarily have all this computer stuff where they could run simulations. But my dad and his buddy were apparently the guys when it came to coming up with solutions for the brass. They'd say, hey, theoretically, if we had to get something from here to here, what's the quickest, best, safest, whatever the parameters were. And my dad's pretty humble guy. He's like, we were the best team that always came up with stuff, because they'd run it past, I guess, several different groups of people that were spread out just to get the best results. But it was very entertaining to learn that, because all the time that I was in, and I did a lot of what they call TDY, which is temporary duty assignments, and that you get qualified on the M16 in basic training. And I had we got pistol certified, and actually was on the base pistol team and that, but I never carried one at work. So, I carried a toolbox with electronic stuff and things like that, never a sidearm sitting at a desk. So it always, intrigued me what was going on with what he was doing. And maybe that's the key thing. It's like, I wonder what kind of different things I might work on in the Air Force that, and they certainly gave me plenty of interesting things to work on. So it was a great time while I served.
Yeah, for sure. And you were just talking about just experience in the Air Force, but if you wanted to touch upon like relationships with other people, like specific jobs you had in the Air Force, or any other experiences you had.
Sure. Well, everybody, when they come in, they go through basic training down at Lackland Air Force Base. And when I went in, it was right around the time when they were finishing making it a 6-week course, and they were going to get ready to make it 8-week course. I think probably like the month after I they call grad it out. I finished up basic training in that. But you're there. It's in Lackland, Texas, or Lackland Air Force, San Antonio, Texas, and you've got people again, like with Stevenson, you get people from all over the area. Well, we're getting people from all over the country. So we had a guy from Alaska who was used to like living out in the bush and hunting for food and doing all these other things. A really nice guy and really intelligent and things like that. And then you had guys who were from like Hawaii and California and Florida. So when I went in, it was January 7th of 87. You know, they actually like shut down the entire area because we got like we got like a 1/4 inch of snow or sleet or something. And we're, under our little training area canopy, and we're like looking out there, and these people are sliding into each other and that. And, up here in the Midwest, we don't get as much snow as we did back then, but, there's a lot of snow. We're used to seeing it. I'm like, no big deal. It's cold. This is what happens when water gets cold. And the guy from Alaska is just like laughing, watching all these people. And then the California, Hawaii, and Florida guys are just like, they'd never seen snow. I mean, literally had never seen it in person. And they're out there making their first snowball and, all kinds of fun stuff. So it was interesting to kind of interact with people from the different areas and understand that, Midwest is the Midwest, a different region is a different region, and we all might do things a little bit differently. But the purpose of basic training is to kind of break down all the individuals and start building back up as a team. So it's not to destroy the individual, it's to break them down to the point where you start relying on the guys around you, and you start to trust them, and you have to be, you might not talk to a guy from Alaska if you're from Florida, because you don't really have a lot of common things. But when you're all going through the same drama of basic training and that, you kind of get rebuilt as a team. Then you find out where you're going to be stationed and what your career field's going to be. And I maxed out the test when you go in there. So they said, what jobs do you want to go for? And I had my main two. I got one of those, and next thing you know, I'm headed off to Keesler, Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi, Keesler Air Force Base for 9 months, learning electronics and that kind of stuff. And it's again the same thing of, suddenly you're marching to class. You guys think it's rough riding the bus or riding your buddy's car in the back seat or something like that. Just imagine marching 2 miles to work or to class, doing class for 6 hours, and then marching back in the heat, in the cold, in the wet. It's downpouring rain. We're working on electronics. I've got a second set of clothes in my bag because you can't work on electronics when you're wet. So it was all these different things of, hey, the mission's got to get done. Here's, we're going to have to march. We don't always have buses and all this other stuff. So, and then you find out what your first, post is going to be. And mine was at Dover Air Force Base. And I, being in the Midwest here, not really having a frame of reference for what was what the East Coast looked like. I'm going to clam chowder land and woolly sweaters and Angela Lansbury. I'm going to be way up there. And then I find out, I'm just south of Philly and west or east of Baltimore, DC, which was phenomenal. I loved that base. That was great. And then you start getting proficient at your job, and next thing you know, you're training the new guys coming in, and you're all working together as a team. And it's, failure is not an option when you're doing those things. There's no, I lost my homework. If you were to have a situation like that, you're going to have a full bird colonel who's the base commander looking over your shoulder going, why isn't my airplane fixed and taking off on time? I have to go explain to my general why this isn't working. Why isn't, you got to explain to him what's going on. It made the accountability level for everybody that much higher. And you didn't want your squadron commander to get in trouble, or your shop commander or anything like that to get upset or something like that. So you always worked extra hard. And if you needed help, then you asked for it. You weren't too bashful to say something. And it's like, sometimes you have to call in the troops for some support. And I think that's one of the things that maybe I underappreciated earlier, in life is sometimes, if you have to ask for help or something like that, people are more than willing to help out or, pitch in when they know there's a just cause in that. So, yeah. So, I mean, I really, really enjoyed my time in doing that kind of stuff because you got to meet the different people. You got to do the different jobs, and then, I don't know, it was like community. It was really cool.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it seems like the military is a very unifying experience, and it just creates a sense of discipline within a person that you got to be accountable, and you got to get the mission done. So
yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And then just to wrap it up, bringing back the book, like you touched upon that you recovered it and you didn't know that you still had it. So did you lose it, or did you just forget about it or misplace it?
I think what happened is when I went off to college, my parents moved from where we were at up in what I think it was called Killdeer at the time, but it's kind of up at that Kruger Road and Cuba, kind of between Cuba Road and 22, up by the Kemper Insurance place. They moved from there out to Algonquin. So I think they took a lot of stuff that I had left in my room when I went off to college, and they just moved it all there and had it packaged up. And when I came back from college and I was getting ready to go into the Air Force, there's a lot of the stuff I didn't need to be digging through the boxes or things like that. So when I actually got I had my parents forward all my stuff to Dover Air Force Base. I think I found it at that point. It was just like, oh my God, I've got this book, and I'm like in the Air Force, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, it kind of sat on the bookshelf because I ended up developing a rather large library, and it was just one of the books there, and I was never like, I'm not going to mail it back. And I was like, I really still enjoy looking at it, and it kind of reminds me of my time at Stevenson. So it's kind of like without having a yearbook in the bookcase, it was like a reminder while I was in the Air Force and traveling doing stuff. And then when I got out of the Air Force and was working for Motorola and that, then I still had it because I was still on the East Coast. And when I came back to school, all my stuff got packed up and then moved back again. So I think it sat safely packed away and then brought out and then packed away whenever I moved. And that's how I found it again. Basically, it was last summer, and was just like, okay, no, I didn't travel back to this area very frequently, and with the schools and everything being on lockdown, I'm like, that's the last thing they want to do is have some dude bringing some book that might or might not be the the carrier of the plague or something like that. So I'm like, you know what, I'll save it, and then I end up moving back up in the region, and I was like, you know what, I got to take a trip down that way. You know what, I'm going to make a point of bringing this book and just giving it back to him and hope for forgiveness. And and it literally sat in the car for probably a year and a half, because when I would come over, I'd be like, no, they're probably still closed. And this time I was like, all right, I'm making a point, I'm returning it, because now it's comical, because it's like 40 years later. I was actually very proud of the way it looked. And Miss Gorham, when she opened it up, the first thing she realized is, she's like, where you used to stick the little card in, the little holder right there, it still said, Stevenson, or Adlai E. Stevenson High School, Prairie View, Illinois. And she's like, wow, this is really old, because we're now called Lincolnshire. And I'm like, that's what it was. It was just, I don't know. I've taken care of my stuff, and I've really, I think over the years, looked at the book and thought fondly back on my time, not only in the Air Force, but at Stevenson, and how far I came from being a freshman, first year writing, until now a grown adult, and and doing working on very interesting R&D projects, and getting 8 patents. It's like I think I'm almost as proud of that book being that good a condition after 40 years as I am of the plaques on the wall. So it's fun.
That's a great story. And just a tangent a bit into Stevenson for our last couple of questions. What was your reaction? I mean, coming back to this campus 40 years later, I'm assuming it was different. So,
well, I'd actually come back in '98 when we were on breakdown at down at Illinois, and I think we came up for I was on a student project where we made half-scale Indy race cars. It's called Formula SAE, and we were up in the area. I think we're up in Mundelein or Libertyville, just kind of testing and showing the car off and looking for sponsors and that. And I mean, me and my then girlfriend, came on campus because I came to show her where I went to high school because we were so close. And we picked up a copy of the Statesman, and it's like student survey or quotes on that. And I think the question of the issue was, how do you feel being on a campus this big with 4,500 students or something like that? And one of the students' reactions was, I can't imagine knowing everybody in my class, and I like the anonymity of that. And I had to reflect back, going, I think I would recognize everybody out of our class. Maybe you didn't see them all the time, or you weren't directly connected to them, but you would kind of know walking through who your people were. And I'm sure after 4 years where you guys are at, and that it's something where you recognize classes because I don't remember seeing them before COVID or something else. But I think you find community where you do. And somewhere I got off on a tangent there.
Well, I was just like right now. So when you came to return the book, you went into.
Oh, yes. So when I came back for our 30th reunion, I think it was about 6 years ago, and we got to tour with Dr. Herzog, who was the superintendent back at that time, and we got to see the campus with the John F. Kennedy Performance Arts there in the football stadium, and it was a torrential downpour for the football game, and it was great going back through all these things, and to see the growth of that. And then funny side story on that, the lockers in the West Building, first hallway, right across from where the admin area used to be, I took a picture on the last day of our senior year, and I'd had them, and I brought them back to the reunion just to see, just to kind of, I don't know, bring my memorabilia or something like that, because I had duplicates of these. And Jane Cerisi and John Weirs, I'd taken a picture of them kind of like hanging out by the locker kind of thing and that. And they were there for the reunion, and they were just laughing hysterically, thinking back to those days. And they did a pose on that, the same exact pose on that. So Jane Cerisi, who's still in the area there, should have copies of those pictures, or I might be able to dig them up if it was ever an interest for you. But yeah, the core of Stevenson is still there, as proven by the locker shots. But then you guys have really grown and expanded it so that it's, we got a hockey team now. I mean,
they've been doing really well.
Well, that's the thing is I broke my collarbone playing floor hockey in the upper gym. And then I went on, and I'm a level 4 hockey coach right now. So, I had the hockey thing. And when I came back and you guys had a hockey team, I rolled a tear. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I would have played, but man, that was phenomenal. So the campus is phenomenal. My message to all the students is, make as much of that opportunity as you can. You have got zero responsibilities right now. You've got every opportunity to explore whatever career, sport, or whatever it is that you want to. Dig in, take advantage of it, because when you get out and you're out in the working world, you'll be paying a lot of money to experience the things, to see if you like it, that you could be doing for free or at a reduced rate with what Stevenson's put together for you. It's a phenomenal facility, educational. It's just, I hope everybody appreciates what they have there and takes advantage of it.
I think that's a great way to conclude. That was going to be my last question, like the impact of high school, but I think you answered it perfectly with that. So thank you so much for being here today, Mr. Meredith.
My pleasure. Anytime, guys. If there's anything we can do to help the students along or something like that, we're all about it.
Thank you so much.
The alums like this stuff, because it's like, giving back to the school that gave something to us. So thank you for pursuing me in the book. Thank Miss Gorham for her kindness for not pursuing me. And I hope the book ends up, I don't know, with some memento or something like that, where,
we'll let you know. We'll let you know. Afterwards, we spoke with Miss O'Neill, a former Stevenson alumni who currently teaches physics and chemistry at Stevenson, and we just wanted to get her input on things Mr. Meredith talked about, such as how her high school experience and experiences with teachers at Stevenson really impacted and influenced her to becoming a teacher and returning back to Stevenson. What about being a teacher excites you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I love a lot of things, but the main thing is I love getting to know students and their interests. I feel like when kids are in high school, they are learning a lot about themselves. This is when they start to think about their future. So being a teacher for me, it's really exciting to possibly make an impact on them and see their interests change. Maybe they end up loving science, or maybe they end up finding just a connection to the content, even though they hated science prior to the class. So I really enjoy just seeing kids interested in a subject that maybe they didn't think they would be interested in, and then just to see them pursue it further is exciting. Like I've had kids who go on past, AP physics and they do another physics class, or kids who take AP Chem later on because they loved chemistry, or kids who try to find internships in like NASA and all sorts of stuff. So it's just fun to see, other kids be excited about science, because I feel like sometimes science has a bad rap, but
Yeah,
it's okay.
I wouldn't say science is my favorite subject, but I think you said a lot of good things about, especially how as high schoolers we're really growing as people as well. So it's important that our classes support that growth, and I think teachers are a big part of that,
Yeah.
building that relationship. Because not just as a teacher, but like you learn how to build connections with like teachers, and like that would be how you make connections with your bosses.
Yeah.
So it's just
And people that you don't know, like in Stevenson,
Exactly.
you don't know a lot of kids. You come into a classroom, you don't know anyone.
Yeah.
And like in our science classes, you're like forced to work with people. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna leave that classroom, you know everyone in there, even if
Exactly.
you didn't know them prior. to.
Yeah, like all the labs we did, you work with different groups.
Yep.
It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, totally.
So you sort of touched on this, but
Yeah.
why did you choose teaching as your career path?
Well, I actually was voted in my chemistry class when I was here a student at Stevenson, like most likely to become a science teacher. And I was like, oh, that's like kind of fun. I really enjoyed my science class. I loved my science teacher. And then I went to college and I wasn't sure. I just wasn't totally committed to being a teacher. I thought maybe I love science, so I went with a chem major. And I knew I wanted to work with kids in some sort of way. So it was either be a teacher, or my other route was be a pediatrician. And so when I was thinking about those things, we actually I took an internship in South Africa, went there and basically worked in the hospitals with kids to see what it was going to be like to be a pediatrician. So actually kind of like living the day-to-day of what a pediatrician would do. We shadowed someone. I worked in the hospitals at the University of Iowa where I went to school, so I felt like I got a good full experience on it, but I just wasn't feeling totally like fulfilled. For me, the main thing was like sometimes I left the hospital and I was sad, and I was like, I don't know if I could do this every single day. And so I started really looking into teaching, and I knew that being with kids and learning about science was a passion of mine. So once I started shadowing some other teachers and going into the classroom and volunteering with tutoring, I immediately was like, this is the path for me. Every time I left, I was just so excited because, you helped a kid understand a tough subject, or you get to see someone else like understand something they didn't know before, or see an experiment that excites them. So pretty much after that, after I kind of ruled out being a pediatrician, I was like, okay, well, I need to give this my full intentions and actually try it out. And I loved it. So after that, I stayed and got my master's in education and wound up here pretty much.
So that leads me to my next question. I mean, why did you end up choosing to come back to Stevenson?
Well, it had always been kind of like, I'd love to come back here. I feel like when it's your alma mater, there's like a little bit of like a tie to it that you feel like, oh, I loved my high school experience, and like I'd love to go back there because I loved my experience so much. I know it's not the same for everybody, but I had such a good experience here that I was always like, if I ever get the chance to go back and like see my old teachers and like work with them, it would be such a cool opportunity. Now, I always thought it would be after I like had established myself as a teacher at a different school and things like that. But yeah, the cards just kind of fell into place. I left Iowa and interviewed at a bunch of schools out here, and it just like worked out. I mean, I am so lucky, and I know how privileged I am to be able to work at a school that has like the resources and things like that to help kids do things that they really want to do. So it just kind of worked out. It like I saw a posting and applied and went through the whole process, and kind of went through the whole process with some other schools. And then when it came down to choosing, it was kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, I thought I would go as a more established teacher, but how great to go to the school and learn from those who taught me, like in my first, second, and third year teaching.
Yeah,
So
that's such a great opportunity.
it worked out.
Yeah.
I know.
So you touched on how amazing your Stevenson experience was. What specifics, what were the things you were involved in, and how, like, why did that help you down your path? You went to Iowa and ended up back here.
Yeah. Well, I went to a really small middle school. I went to West Oak. It's a feeder middle school, and I think I came here knowing like 5 people, including my brother and sister. So I'm a triplet. We came together, and I knew them and like 2 other people. And so I think I was really overwhelmed at first at, just like going to a big school, not knowing anyone where everyone knows each other. And I just felt like the classroom communities that I were in like forced me to get to know people. And I was not like sitting at my desk listening to my teacher's lecture, but getting to know all these new people, and then just the opportunities that Stevenson offered, just like extracurriculars and finding my interests and like doing things like that. So I ended up playing soccer while I was here. I did cheerleading all 4 years while I was here. I did all the clubs, all of the things, NHS. And it was just a good opportunity because everything that I did, I met new people. And I just thought that was one of the coolest things about Stevenson, which is why I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to a smaller school. That's one of the aspects that I loved about Stevenson. So I kind of went Big Ten because I wanted to go to a big school where I could meet new people every class that I took. And I chose Iowa just because of the scholarship opportunities that were there, and it just worked out. So I don't know. I was never someone who was like, I'm going to go to Yale. Like I never had a strong feeling about where I wanted to go. I'm someone who I think anywhere I would have went, I would have had a great time, made good connections with people. And so they had almost a full ride for me, and I was like, okay, well, that's pretty much it. Like it wasn't really a big decision maker for me, and it helped that my brother went there too. So I knew someone, again, walking into the door. So, yeah.
And you talked about how like coming from a small middle school, it can be a daunting transition. Yeah. I came from a different country, so it was like, and it seems like everyone knows each other. They have their middle school friend groups, but it's hard to break in. But once you do, it's just such a great experience. There's so many opportunities to take part in.
I know obviously like some people from my middle school who came here were like, this is too big. Yeah. I don't like it. But for me, like just someone who wanted to get to know more people, it was great.
Yeah, same. That was the same experience for me. So how does Stevenson compare then to how it is now?
Well, I actually just had a Friendsgiving with some of my high school friends like the other day, and we were just kind of talking about this. Well, first of all, it's way fancier. I would say like the biggest thing, like my science classroom, just because I teach in a science classroom every day, was like a tiny little classroom that was all cramped with all of our little desks. We didn't have these nice like high top tables that like rolled and everything. And then our lab was like a separate room behind us because they couldn't make our classrooms double as lab. Like it just wasn't feasible at the time. The other thing is the building, the East building, which we're in now, was like the new building. It was like brand spanking new. It was like, we were all so excited. I know it's like walking around in a square, but it was like revolutionary to us. And I'd probably say, obviously, we didn't have the like bells and whistles, no sushi on Fridays, no jasmines, none of that. And the food was like your typical high school food. I think this was like really before people actually started to care about the nutrition that kids are eating during the school day. And it was like, Bosco sticks and burgers and fries like pretty much every single day. And the thing that my friends always talk about is like those cookies that that they have at Jasmine's. They've always had those cookies. It was just like the chocolate chip, but they were like 50 cents when I was here. And now they're like $1.50. So some inflation since I've been here. And then, pretty much everything else has been the same. Obviously, the school continues to grow and continues to become more and more diverse, which is awesome. So that's a little bit different, but I mean, I graduated with close to a little bit over 1,000 kids, which is probably similar to what you're going to have too. So it's always been big.
Yeah, I think that's one thing.
One thing that stays the same.
Yeah. So we talked to someone else for this podcast who graduated in like '89, and he also had it was just as big. It's
Yeah,
crazy how
it's
Stevenson
crazy.
always
They just
been.
keep, yeah, and I just saw they put up another like subdivision like right over here, and more houses are going up. I'm like, how will I fit another kid in my classroom? It might be impossible, but maybe we'll get bigger spaces. I don't know.
We'll see. But was there an experience with a certain teacher that really drove you to like becoming a teacher, just coming back to Stevenson?
Mr. Kelly was my chemistry teacher, and he actually just retired last year, and he was like the number one reason why I was like, if I'm ever gonna become a teacher, I want to be like him. He just came with so much energy and excitement every single day, and if it wasn't like you had to be the most knowledgeable person in the room, as long as you were like having fun learning science. And I feel like sometimes with science, people are like, if you don't know it, you don't get it, it's like not for you. My dad is in science, my sister's in science, and they talk about some stuff, and it's still like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I need to process it. But like the difference is like, I really enjoy the like doing of science, the lab section of it, the understanding of like how it relates to our day-to-day life. And my teacher, Mr. Kelly, did such a good job of like finding these concepts and like connecting it to something that like made sense to kids who maybe like have to work a little bit harder. And so I think everyone just had such a positive experience in his classroom, and he made everyone feel so welcome, and we all enjoyed the class, that it was hard to walk away and not feel like, okay, this is something I'd love to do for kids or someone else, like whether it was like for profession or like helping your other friend who's in the class.
Yeah.
But yeah, he just retired, and it was really, I mean, I was so lucky to work with him here for like 6 years before he retired. And to this day, like he says I'm his I used to be his number one favorite student over all of his years, and now I think I've been demoted to number 2, but I'll still take it.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was just such a great influence on me, and then continued to be a mentor when I came back here to Stevenson, just being able to like observe me, give me feedback and stuff like that as a new teacher. So it was awesome just to be able to like work with him before he left, which is crazy.
So like you said, Mr. Clay became a mentor for you, just like a positive experience to you becoming a teacher.
Yeah.
So to wrap our discussion up, how important are these high school experiences and working with these teachers to determining what you want to do in the future?
I mean, I think like the thing for me is like, I know not every kid is going to go into science with their major. But I do hope that kids develop a relationship with their teacher to the point where they could ask them for advice on like choosing schools or like how to choose like their pathway, because I truly like, you're 18 and you're asking you to like make a decision about your life. Like, this is what I want to do at 18, and it's like that could change, and it's a lot of pressure. And I feel like not everyone's going to choose science, but I want to make sure that kids feel comfortable to talk to me about like, hey, this is like what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts? Even if it has nothing to do with science, but just looking at different schools, different programs, class loads, things like that. Because obviously being a teacher, we've already been through all of that and have a little bit of experience on our side. Like, I know when I left Stevenson, I thought when I went to college, like I had to take honors everything, because that's like sometimes the underlying like, you know, message. Sometimes you're like, oh, I got to take honors everything and make sure it looks good. And I thought that was what I had to do in college, and I immediately was like, okay, that is not the same story. And like that was just something that like I had built up for myself. And like my recommendation to kids now all the time is like, take one class of honors that you like are really dedicated and interested in, and like see what that level is like. But you don't need to like overdo it, you know what I mean? But I just had a different conception about it when I went to college, and no one was there to tell me like, hey, like you might want to dial it back. So I think like, you know, just developing a relationship with your teachers to talk about some of those things that like you might not think about, or the things that maybe you don't want to necessarily talk to your parents about because you're like, hey, I don't want to take this class, like what are your thoughts, you know what I mean? Just finding other options, like that's kind of the biggest thing. Like I don't expect to like mentor anyone to be like, you must go to the University of Iowa. Would I love it? Yes. But like just telling kids like there are other options out there. Like I definitely chose my school based on the scholarship opportunities, which I know is not like common. I think a lot of kids like have one school in their mind and like that's where I'm going, you know what I mean? And so just even having a conversation about being open-minded so that when you leave college, you don't have student loans, and like the wonderful ability that has given me now, like as an adult, like, you know what I mean? Things that kids like don't necessarily think about.
Yeah,
so
you can travel, enjoy your life. That's
exactly.
a great point.
Yeah.
So yeah, these relationships, I was just thinking about myself, like with my teachers, they're definitely going to help impact me as I grow into my adult life. So
Yeah.
it's really important.
For sure.
And with that, we would like to conclude this episode of Statesman Soundwave. We wanted to thank Mr. Meredith and Miss One for their significant contributions to this podcast. I mean, Mr. Meredith's story about returning a library book 40 years late and how that book really influenced his journey was just so inspiring to hear, and we can't wait to hear more stories like that in the future if we ever come across one. If you have a similar experience, something in high school really sparked your journey in the future, let us know down in the comments. We'll be more than happy to hear that. Otherwise, we'll catch you guys on the next episode of Statesman Soundwave. Thank you.